During the weekend at Pokemon Worlds of 2023, there was actually a hack check going around for VGC players that was a little bit different than the typical online matchmaking check that checks to see the legitimacy of your Pokemon. And apparently a bunch of different well-known battlers were disqualified from Worlds after spending a lot of money and time investment getting good at the game and traveling to Japan and also performing well in the season to get that invite. So yeah, this is actually kind of a interesting topic in the community because it sparked a lot of conversation about, is Pokemon behind times for a competitive game? And I think this is a very interesting situation all around, and I think good could come from this somewhat terrible situation for a lot of these competitors. But I definitely feel there's a little bit of a nuanced take to make here while we are in the current situation with the Pokemon Company and how the rules are applied to VGC. So with that being said, I mean, it's no news that Pokemon definitely tries to milk its player base for money. I mean, this channel birthed from Pokemon Go. I mean, I kind of stopped playing that game competitively because I felt it actually struggles with, interesting enough, a lot of the things that people are discussing about VGC and the current state of it. But I arguably feel that Pokemon Go might even be worse in a lot of ways, with XL candy and exclusivity of how much money you want to spend in the game and such. But anyways, enough of that. I think VGC currently in general definitely needs a little bit of an examination of how to open up more accessibility to a player base. I mean, I felt that VGC actually was making a pretty decent change in accessibility for new players and such, but Pokemon should definitely update how EV training is done, potentially even accessibility of Pokemon. I mean, this format was definitely thrown upon people right before Worlds, and typically they do try to keep the same format that people are comfortable playing in and have figured out before they go into Worlds. I'm not trying to call out any of these people. I mean, me personally, I do not gen at all. I completely breed all of my Pokemon from eggs, or I catch them, resoft, reset for 0 IVs if I need to. But I also do happen to play into the limitations of that world. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and soft reset for Cresselia and Legends Arceus when I can't even see the IV spread. So, for example, I tend to not run certain Pokemon that I can't easily or within reason obtain. And I am a Poke fan. You know, I own all the games for the most part. I mean, I don't buy Sword and Shield, but I at least own each individual game to some degree from a generation. So I do have access to pretty much all the Pokemon that are currently in this format. So I am a little biased. I've been playing since Red and Blue. I mean, not to say that those like Gen 1 or 2 are relevant in this regard, but every game from Gen 3 forward, even the remakes, they are all relevant in building your collection in this current era of VGC. I take the L to a degree that I can't play certain Pokemon I'd love to play around because I can't personally invest the time or effort to find them. But I also am in a position where I do make content on the internet, and I have had the pleasure of building a community who loves to help me get Pokemon. I mean, I had my homie Chimchar on Twitch who would be constantly catching things, and if he found anything with a 0 attack IV, he'd ask me, do I need it? And he found an Indeedee with Trick Room with the 0 attack IV, which is ideal to have. He gave that to me, and I've never used it. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't want to use it. I'm just saying that like a Pokemon like Indeedee currently in the game that maybe accidentally got Trick Room through raids, that was quite a grind to potentially even get one that's optimized. You can only imagine how many people are running Indeedee Armor Rouge, and their Indeedee was absolutely genned. But yeah, like I never even ran that duo in the game unless unless I use a rental team, of course. But I never made a team around Trick Room or those two because of that very reason. And this kind of brings me to the point of, while I do think Pokemon really needs to revisit and maybe consider, adding more accessibility options in their games, stop making it so you have to own multiple different generations of a game to play in the current specific game. while that is something I do agree with a lot of the arguments that people are having, I have to remind people that the current rule set is the way it is. And if we really want to evaluate, and I can totally understand that people have lives to live, they have families, they don't want to be sitting there grinding terra shards and all that over and over. But the reality is people are playing legitimate, and it is, in fact, an advantage for people to gen Pokemon into their game and play all the diverse comps on the fly. If they want to instantly make a new Pokemon EV train, there you go. And here I am as someone who constantly is retraining my shiny Annihilate, for example, that I caught in game, and just to try to like update. But of course, I am not trying to say that everyone that got disqualified at Worlds deserves it. I'm saying that people have to understand that there is an advantage to genning versus playing the game how it is intended. And with that being said, I'm not even against genning. You still have to be good at the game. And think of it this way. While I'm not against people genning, and if I face someone who gens their team, I don't think they necessarily have any true competitive edge over me because of my own knowledge of the game. But it does allow them to dive into metas and maybe explore things a little bit differently. But let me take this back a little bit, and I'm not even trying to play devil's advocate here. I literally will spend all my time on Showdown before I ever dare to invest in building any Pokemon in my game. But now that I've gotten that point across, let's kind of look at what pretty much happened. Like, a lot of these trainers, they got disqualified, and the thing that's rough about this is some of these trainers maybe legitimately didn't even know that some of their Pokemon were genned. Because it's not all gen Pokemon are going to give you the tall tale signs of perfect IV shiny or 0 attack, 0 speed IV on a legendary that you need to have. So, I mean, some of these people could have just been bad actors and they already knew what they were doing. And unfortunately, this definitely caught them off guard regardless, because this wasn't really, there's no real way to have known this would happen to a player going to Worlds this year. And also the fact that I'm sure they tested their teams out online and they're allowed to be used on the ladder. So it's a very strange place to be. The thing that's bothersome is that what if you were just trading with a rando, or you were doing a some sort of like surprise trade, and you traded on Pokemon Home and you got a legendary that you need, and you went in and you bottle capped it and you changed its nature, you EV trained it yourself, and then you come to find out this whole time this Pokemon was not a legitimate Pokemon. And how could you have known? I mean, I hope that if they're going to be cracking down on gen Pokemon, that there's a better way to check the legitimacy of the Pokemon that are currently in your game or that you get from trades. I mean, this is something that, I mean, I have Pokemon that I run that I've definitely traded on Pokemon Home, and I have no idea, because some of them I have, like I have Urshifu, for example, that is from, I think, Japan or Korea, I can't remember exactly. It's not, I mean, it doesn't, when I look at it, it looks normal. It doesn't have perfect IVs, random nature, etc. So, to best of my knowledge, that's a legitimate Urshifu that I have. But now I'm very skeptical about even using any type of legendary Pokemon that are not traded from a source I know their legitimacy, or something that I caught myself. So that's something that is a little concerning about the state of the game. But to kind of go back to the state of VGC in general, I am definitely in the camp that they need to change how this game functions. I don't think most VGC players want to sit there and grind the game. I mean, I'll admit there's a part of me that does enjoy being a part of the team building process of making my team. But like I said, as much as I'm just trying to point out that there is a competitive advantage to someone just being able to gen versus not, I personally don't think it really matters that much to me. Like, I'm not going to sit here and if I lost someone knowing that they genned their team, am I going to feel bad and feel like, oh, they beat me only because they genned their team? No, I'll never feel that way. I mean, personally, I enjoy Pokemon because there is other options. You don't have to just run Cresselia. You don't have to just run Urshifu. Yeah, they're definitely good, and I mean, I would not recommend not running them, but there's ways to adapt in Pokemon games without having to succumb to running the Pokemon that typically are probably the hardest to obtain or the most annoying to try to get with the right stats. And I just kind of wanted to make this video to talk about that. Yeah, I think potentially in the DLC they might try to up how, you know, competitive play is. Maybe they'll introduce a way to turn IVs to 0, which would be game-changing on a lot of fronts. But the real issue here is the lack of consistency of how to consider Pokemon legitimate or not. I mean, again, I think there's certain things that make it obvious if a Pokemon is gen, like a Paradox Pokemon with perfect IVs, a shiny Paradox Pokemon with perfect IVs. I mean, come on, like, really? But again, people are smart. They know how to gen in Pokemon that look just like any ordinary legitimate Pokemon. So I'm just very curious, how can they actually tell? And I hope they share how they're going to go forward about hack checking these Pokemon and all that jazz. But yeah, in general, I just think it's kind of sad to see that all these trainers ended up spending all this time and money to get there, to go to Japan. It's an event that every Pokemon battler wants to go to. You know, it's a dream of a Pokemon battler to make it to Pokemon Worlds. And it's kind of sad. They spent all this money and time to get there, and now they're finding out that the rules have slightly changed. And it's not that the Pokemon Company has ever endorsed genning in any sense. It's just that now maybe it's the fact that apparently in Japan, it's illegal to mod game data in game consoles in general. I didn't really know this, but this is something that I mean, this is just a screenshot, obviously, of text. This could be anyway. Someone could just type this up, and it's not legitimate. But I did hear rumors about maybe that's why they're being more strict in Japan, is that they actually do have a law in place about modifying and to be able to gen Pokemon. Yes, there's ways that you can trade with Discord bots and stuff, but for the most part, people just break their switches and they use PK Hex to do that. But yeah, I don't really know. So I guess like most of the people that might watch this, unless this, you know, reaches outside my normal typical audience, they are Pokemon Go players, and I kind of have a similar sentiment about how Niantic and Pokemon, they tend to have all these different grind fests that you have to do to get even a good Great League team, like Lickitung, Medicham, Azumarill, Sableye. It's kind of very similar sentiment, and maybe even worse in Pokemon Go with how the grinding is. As much as it may be enjoyable to play these games and catch Pokemon and all that jazz, whenever you're trying to build a competitive team, the last thing you really want to be doing is spending hours upon hours just making the game, making the Pokemon you need to actually even play the team you want to play. And if we're talking about competitive gaming, I mean, let's be real. All competitive games should be an even playing field where both players are just min-maxing, optimizing how they use their resources that are allotted to them. And yeah, I think that's good enough for this little rant for now. So yeah, I just felt like this is a topic I talk about a lot on my Daily Sassifrass YouTube channel, where I play a lot of Scarlet and Violet because I breed a lot. I breed my shiny Pokemon. I catch my shinies. I really go out of my way to play the game legitimately. Understand, I'm on the side of change. We need to make this game more accessible. I'm not sitting here trying to act like my Pokemon are any better because I spent hours upon hours breeding for them. They mean something to me, but the way people gen, it doesn't affect how I have adapted and played Pokemon over the years. And with that being said, hopefully you enjoyed this video, this little bit of a rant, and the Sass Squad's getting stronger each and every day. Good morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you're tuning in. I'll catch you in the next one.